Okay, this is Rapid Application Development, Lesson 5, Part 2. We're talking about common dialog boxes, and I kind of touched upon it in Part 1 of Lesson 5, right? Which is stuff that's kind of built into Visual Studio, the whole environment, and the .NET framework. So you have common dialog components that, for example, things for printing, for opening, for saving, for colors, for fonts, for doing all these things that are kind of built in. And it kind of makes no sense for you to, reinvent the wheel when Microsoft has done something to standardize some of the look and feel of these common dialog components, right? Actually, it exists in a lot of other programming languages as well, and other environments, not just on the .NET framework, right? So you have this pointer dialog box, right? We want to change your pointers. Your color dialog, a font browser, font dialog, an open file dialog, and so on. And all these are just standard windows that would pop up that basically allow you to modify your fonts or colors or whatever. So how do we do this? So there's a general form. So you have your whatever the dialog object is, show dialog, right? That would be your command, right? So let's say, for example, it's the font dialog or color dialog here in the examples. So color dialog 1, and then show dialog. And how do we get that? We have to actually add the component again to our form, right? You can't actually call upon the dialog unless it's part of your form, right? It's not there by default, because you may not need it from one form to the next. Okay. Let's talk about modal versus modeless windows for a second, right? So what's a modal window? You're going to hear about this in other applications and other environments as well. Anyone? Kind of. Modal means that, when it's active, you can't do anything else, right? Which means that, like, for example, an alert blocks everything else. You can't continue with your code unless this modal window is clicked, some kind of response, a button or something is used, or an escape key or something. Modeless forms allow you to continue. They don't demand a response, and they kind of sit there. For example, a floating properties window would be a modeless window, right, that you can actually create, right? That pops up, and it doesn't disrupt the current form that you're working on. So, okay, so I've created my dialog box, but I want to use, I've got a component like color dialog, and I want to change my my color or my font. I made a selection, but how do I programmatically, again, from a code perspective, how do I take the information and change it? Okay, so let's go back to, I made a mistake there. Let's go back to Visual Studio. So here I am. I want to add my dialog. So I go to dialogs here on the properties, the toolbox, and I have these dialogs. I want to kind of add in the color dialog. I want to add that in, and here it is in the component side. And I want to also use the font dialog. Here it is down here in the component, right? So it appears as a component down here. And I want to kind of make it so that I need another menu, don't I? Right? Something like an edit menu. So I go here, and let's say as an example, it's going to be &E for edit. Okay, and underneath here, I'm going to program something called font. So maybe we'll say font .. as an example. Let's say I want to put in here an &F, if that makes any sense, and a color dialog. So color with a C, if that doesn't clash, .. And I'm using the Canadian version of color, not the American version. So again, here's my components, font and color. And when I click on the font, double-click on it, it creates my font toolstrip menu item. And in here, I want to activate my dialog box. So I want to say whatever the dialog box for the font is, .show. So, okay, I'm going to put in there show the font dialog box, right? What's the purpose of like font? Changes your fonts. So if, let's say, for example, you want to change the fonts of a particular, text box, text area, whatever you want, just like we would if you were modifying a header or something that you want to change the form. You're making a form that actually creates a form, right? I'm just showing font dialog here. So again, I start typing font dialog 1, right? That's the 1, right? Dot show dialog, right? So here it is. So I'm going to show it. Now this doesn't actually do anything. Let's just go back, and I'll do the same thing for color. So here, show the color dialog box. Change your pointers, right? So color dialog 1, and then show dialog. There it is. Okay, so I've got them showing. So if I run it, save everything and run, here I am. And if I've done everything correctly, if I click font, wham, the font dialog box shows up, which is your standard font dialog box you see in other applications for Windows, right? Take a look for those people who haven't seen it. There it is. And it appears dead center of your screen, okay, over your application. And if I change something here, if I go to 14 as an example, and I click OK, it does nothing because I haven't programmed it to do anything, to respond, right? Take care. Same thing with your color dialog. If I click color dialog, the color chooser comes up, and I can choose whatever color I want. I can also define custom colors. This is a standard color dialog that you'd see in Microsoft. But no matter what I choose here, so I choose a color and I press OK, nothing happens, right? Because I haven't programmed it to do anything yet. Okay. So how do we do that? So again, if you go back to the PowerPoint, what does it say? I want to change the title, back color to to whatever I've chosen for my color dialog. Okay, so let's say I want to choose the color or the background or whatever it's going to be, right? The back color, I can choose that. I can also do the color for the form, right? So let's go back to Visual Studio. I exit, and when I go back to my code, so here's my color dialog. I want to change the color and the font for my form, right? So this is kind of what we talked about before, right? How do I do that? So if I want to change the color, I want to say, well, this dot back color, as an example for the form, is equal to, right, your color dialog 1 dot color, right? That seems pretty simple. Let's see if that works. So I'm changing the back color of the form itself to whatever I've chosen in my into my color dialog. So let me bring that up. There I am. I'm running. I changed my back color to this color. Okay. Right, and it changed the back color. Press exit. And I did it right here. So this, again, is the form itself, back color, color dialog dot color. Right? Yes? I find this like a lot of Windows applications, they don't change any of the colors. No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't. None of them would. Again, I'm showing you some standard, we're looking at standard dialogues today, but we're not touching upon the open or the save, because first you have to know how to use these standard little ones, right? So more from from demonstration purposes only, right? Chances are, and I might ask you to do it in an assignment so you can demonstrate that you know where they are and how to create a dialog, right? But in future assignments, you'll be using the open and save file dialogues, right? So, and there's a whole series of things you need to do with that are kind of combined with opening and saving. Because you have to do file manipulation, right? But you're right. Yeah, no, typically fonts and colors, unless you're actually doing something with, like you're creating a Word-style text editor, doesn't make any sense. Yeah?
So when you do the show dialog, does it stop the current thread and start a new thread for the dialog box? Because so that when it returns back to that, that's how it knows the color is starting?
Yes. And the thing is, it's a modal form again, right? So you can't click away from it. Right? Once the thing is activated, you got to press OK or cancel, or else you won't be able to continue. So it's kind of it stops your app from working temporarily, like you said, in a separate thread, right? Okay, so here we are. I want to do the same thing with fonts. And again, I'm going to say this dot font, right, as an example. So here it is. This dot font, right, is equal to font dialog, right, dot font. Okay, so I'm choosing my font, and I press start, and let's try that again. Let's press start. So I select my font, and this time I make my font, instead of Microsoft Sans, I don't know, whatever's my system font. I want to choose Calibri. I don't know. It's a standard one. A lot of people like to use Calibri, bold 12. And then it changes my entire form. If you notice, my buttons just changed to Calibri 12, right? So I can change the back, and I can change my color at the same time. Color, I want my background color when I'm working to be kind of like a more of a darker background, and there it is, this weird green, right? Make sense? The thing is, going back to the presentation here, one of the things you may want to do is, and we've done this show dialogue before, is you want to kind of have the standards, whatever the existing color is. If you want your current dialog box to kind of pull up what the existing color is, you can set it to that existing color first. So how do we do that? So basically what we're going to do is the opposite thing. We're going to say our font dialog 1.font is equal to whatever the standard color is or font. Okay, so let's just try that. So I go back, Visual Studio, and I say, well, when I start my app, before I display my dialog, I want to kind of set my font dialog, my standard, my default, right, dot font. I want to equal that to whatever this dot font is, right, kind of thing. I don't want it. I want it to show what my current font is, right? So there it is. And the same thing for color. So I want to say, well, my color dialog dot color is equal to this dot color on my form, back color, right, on my form. So that way, you know, it takes the standard color. Everybody knows what the original color is, right? Now I run it. Here it is, and I go to font, and then if you notice, it says Microsoft Sans regular 8. If I change to 10, now, here it is, and I go back to font, it remembers. It knows what my current color is, or my current font is. Before, if I went back here, it would be the standard, whatever the standard font is for the font dialog, right? So that wouldn't be right. And same thing if I change my back color. If I go to Edit, Color, and I change my back color to red, right? As an example, see the standard color was up here, right? I modified it. Let me just go back. So File, Font, or Color, I mean. The standard color appears here, right? But because that's the standard color, so that's not right. Right? It should be the back color. So if I press OK, right, this color should change, right? My back color. So that didn't work, actually. See? This should be modified. This should be somewhere, another color that I don't see here. So if I choose on something else and press OK, and then I go back, the color should remember, and it does, right? But it should actually have it from the get-go.
Then again, it's considered default, but your form initially was considered default color. So then
We don't know what that color is, right? It's a default.
Default
Yeah.
would be an undisclosed one, so they would.
You're right, right. So if I was to change my form color, that's a good point. So if I was to change my background, my back color for my form initially here in Design View, so here's my back color. Instead of Control, I make it light, or color light, like this, right? Here it is. And that's the back color for the form. And now I run it. Let's see if you're right. And I go to color. No.
I think it's because it's if you chose the color options.
Like an actual color?
You have to actually choose an actual color because I think it's undefined if it's a control type. So if you see, there's a custom there.
Yep.
And then if you chose one of the whatever, maybe.
Ugh.
That's awful, but okay.
Well, let's make it so it's extreme, right? And
I'm guessing here.
no.
Fail. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. So something's not right with that one. So let's check out what I did wrong. So go back to, you know, I'm saying the color dialog dot color, right, is equal to this dot back color. That doesn't seem to work, right?
What is this dot back color?
This is the form color, right? My color for my form. This works. I can set it this way, but I can't do it this way, right? And same thing with font. I bet you font doesn't work either. Let's check that out. So I'm going to go back. We'll just do an undo. And undo again. And undo one more time. And if I change my standard font for the form, so here it is. Sorry. Here it is. If I change the standard font to 12, here it is. Make my form bigger. Right. Let's just make it so it's a little smaller. Oops. Got to move that button too. There it is. And I press start. And I go edit fonts. It should say it is. So that one worked.
So it might be your back color.
So something's wrong with the back color font. Can anyone look it up? I would challenge one of you guys to figure out why, when I set up my font as the default font for the form, with the font dialog box, not the font, but the color, it doesn't pull up the right color on my color chooser. Okay, it actually pulls up this. If I go to example, if I run it, here's what I'm talking about. I go to color, it shows this color, which is not my color. That's my back color, right? I don't know why it blinked out like that, but that's okay. So if someone can figure it out, and while we're going in the presentation, bring it up. We'll pull it up on the video here. Okay. Moving on. I know, but when we shifted it, Kevin and I shifted it to its non-standard color, it didn't work. Right, so it doesn't matter. So there's no difference there. Okay, so I'll challenge you. Take a look, see if you can figure it out. Again, typically we don't do this kind of stuff anyway, and all right. We'll continue. Here we go. So again, we want to take on the properties of whatever we're looking on first. Again, this would be if we're looking at a label, we want to get that initial properties for the color for the label, and then modify it afterwards so that it pops up with the right properties. So we're going to move on from a dialog box. I'll let you guys fool around with that and figure it out. Creating context menus. Let's take a look at that. So again, context menus, they're necessary, in certain places. Like for example, if I want to right-click and I want to do a properties of a particular form or option, right? That's usually what we do it for, right? If I'm creating a print form, and it's going to give you how to create this example, print something out on the printer, and you click on the properties box as an example, or right-click on a particular form. You want to modify certain things. Context menus are cool. And typically, though, in Windows applications, they may not be applicable depending on what kind of application you're doing. So I don't see a lot of call for that, typically. And they have to be context sensitive. For example, your context menu has to be linked to a particular object, whether it's the form itself or a control, right? It can't just work on its own. You can't just right-click outside of the form and pull up a context menu. It doesn't make any sense. So it's contextual, or it's relevant to the type of control that you're clicking on. That's the first thing. So example would be if you want to pull up the font, the color, and this kind of thing. If I want to make a context menu, how do I do it? Let's try that. So I already have the color and font dialog components, so I'm not going to rewrite those. Okay, so here I'm clicking on the form itself because those are the ones I'm creating. And if I look up, and if I look at context menu strip, I have none, right? Because I haven't added that in. So I got to go over to menus on my thing here, and I'm going to drag and drop the context menu item here. So now it becomes a control or a component on my component strip here, right? Still, it's not linked to anything. So even if I define it, if I click onto it, I can actually start programming it. And I'm going to try and program it the exact same way. So I'm going to say, example, font, right? I think that's what I did first, ... And then I think it's color. Let's see what I did here. Yeah, font and color. So here it is. I got to click on the actual tool strip menu down here to bring it up. So here is color, right? And maybe I'll even put an exit in there. Why not? So I'll put in an exit. So, and you know what? Maybe a nice separator would be cool because I think probably separator makes sense in the to separate between the different components. There it is. So between font and color and exit, I should have a separator. Okay, cool. So now it's not linked to anything, so it's not going to come up, even if I run it, right? And one day when my app wants to run, there it is. And I right-click on it, it's not doing anything. It's not doing anything anywhere, right? Because right-clicking doesn't mean anything because I haven't assigned my context menu item to anything yet. So I click on the, let's say I want to make it part of the form, and now in here I can choose context menu strip, and now because it exists as a component down here in my component strip, I can choose it. So this is now my context menu is going to be here anytime I click on the actual form itself, not on other components. Okay, so if I run it, I right-click. Now here's my context menu that'll pop up wherever I right-click. And if you notice, if I click away, it's not a modal window that comes up. It's just a menu strip that comes up. So click away, just like if I do for a menu, it'll pop away. Right? That's the way it works. Okay, but right now they don't do anything because even though they're labeled font, color, and exit, they don't really do anything because I haven't programmed them. So I got to program those too. So again, the best way for me to do this is go to your context menu, and I don't want to rewrite these things. So I click on font as my item, and I use my my event kind of button here on the property toolbar, and my click event for the item is going to go to something I've already written, which is the font tool strip item, right? I don't want to rewrite that. Same thing with my color. So here's my click event, and my color is going to go to the color tool strip menu item. And the exit, I've already written that too, so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. I'm going to put the exit tool strip menu item to work as well. So now, not only do I have the exit button, not only do I have the exit menu, but I also have my context menu as an exit as well. Right here they are. Yeah.
When you right-click on the, let's say you right-click on a specific object on the form, element of the form,
Yeah.
And you call, let's say you call a method on like 1/1%, will the sender in this case be the object you right-click on? So like let's say you wanted to right-click on a specific element to change that element's color.
Yeah.
Would you be able to find the right click through like sender element or something?
I want you to use a debugger, right, and find out what the sender is when it comes through to a particular code. So you're listening for a sender only when an object is being clicked, right? So what are you clicking? If you're right-clicking, it's a different type of click event than a left click, right? So depending on what's clicked, it's going to show up on your sender. What button you're using, number one, where it's being clicked on, like the actual X and Y coordinates, that's going to be sent to your sender, right? And you know, for example, from a context menu item perspective, that's something different. You get a different item in your sender because you're listening for context menus. If I right-click on a button, it doesn't do anything because I haven't programmed my right-click to do anything, right? I have to listen for a right-click. I'm usually listening for a left-click. That's something else. Or a double-click or something else, right? So whatever you do, if you're listening for something or you're looking for something in your sender, it's going to pass over the event that you're doing. So with your whether it's a scroll, a right-click, whatever you're doing with your mouse, whatever kind of interface you're using, it's going to pass into the sender. Okay? Does that answer your question? No? What are you really asking?
How to access that right-click? So you're saying you have to write a listener for it?
Yes. And if you're clicking on it, it's still a click event, right? But what's happening is the sender, it's carrying different pieces of information, right? So depending on which button is clicking, you're coding it to respond to the type of button that's being clicked, as opposed to just the left mouse button, right? So if the right mouse button is clicked, then you do this. If the left mouse button is clicked, you do this, as an example, as opposed to just doing the same thing depending on which button is clicked. Right now, if you program the click event, it responds to the left mouse button by default. Yeah, because if you look at this, if I look at the exit button, here's a good example, the exit button, right? If you notice, I have a click event, right? And if I look at right-click, do I have that as an event? Right to left, no, right? I don't have a right-click event, right? I'm not listening for a right-click event, right? I'm listening for a click event. It's a click, right? There's other kinds of events, like a drag-and-drop event, an enter event, you know, enable change. If you look down, a key press, all these different things. But there is no right-click event, right? So inside your click event, the sender is going to pass in, right? Depending on what button is being clicked, the sender portion of the object is going to pass in the type of event that's happening. What is the event that's going on? Like, was it a right click, left click? Like I said, do a debug. And when you get to your click event, you can actually, in your locals window, you'll see what the click event is showing. All right? It'll actually show you in there, in your debug window, what is being clicked when you click right or left button.
Okay, but as far as integrating it with the context menu, because when you pull up the context menu, so you pull up the context menu on an object on the form like the exit button, you want to be able to do something different on the context form based on where you click on it.
Yes, so you create multiple context menus. So you have a context menu 1 for your form, the background form. Then you click context menu for, you can actually click on the object itself. Like, let's say, for example, I have an exit button. That's different, okay? That's what you're asking. So I have a context menu strip down here, right? My menu strip 1, okay? But I also want another context menu. So I'm going to kind of pull this in here as well and put it on top of the exit button, right? That doesn't mean anything yet. But here's my second context menu. And the only thing I want for the exit button is, to say something like exit again, right? That's all I wanted to pull up. So exit, right? So here it is. And I might want to name this something different. Like right now it's called context menu strip. And I don't know, because I have more than one now, it makes sense for me to rename them so it's right? So my name for my context menu is maybe my exit context menu item, right? So here it is. So now this is my exit context menu strip instead of menu strip 2. Sorry. Right? You can have as many of these as you want, by the way. For every item, any item that you click will have its own context menu, right? Now, right now, my exit button, if I go to my exit button itself, if I go to context menu, there's nothing that's assigned to it. So I can actually change this to my exit context menu strip, right? If that's what you're talking about. Okay. And now when I run it, now it doesn't do anything yet, right? But if I run it and actually right-click onto it, I pull up an exit, right? If I right-click here, I pull up something else. So every item can have a different context menu if you really want to go there, right? It just means more programming for you, right? So here, I want to program this thing now to work. So here's my context menu. I want to click on my click event, and I want to choose my exit, right? So now it works too. I don't know why I would do that, but I mean, just for example purposes, let's just run it. And again, if I right-click on my context menu and click exit, it'll exit the form as well, right? So yes, you can have multiple context menus for your form. Does anyone figure out that color dialog thing yet? I'm guessing not. And I think there's something to do with, like you said, a standard color that we're using to set up the color dialog. Okay. I'll try and come up back with a response to that one next week, or maybe through email, if people care. Okay, so we built our context menu. And again, if we want to code it, it's kind of the same way we do any kind of menu. And this is an example of that, where we kind of have the menu or the fonts and color dialogues come up as different. But here's the challenge, though. If I want to change my font and colors, and my font and color dialog right now pops up, do I have to assign the font? Is it going to take on the font property of the last object that I access? And chances are, if you program it that way, the answer is yes, right? So example, I can use a color dialog and a font dialog as a font dialog and a color dialog. It doesn't really matter, right? I can program it so it's a default, comes up with a default color. I can choose a color that I want it to come up with. Or I can choose it so that it comes up with, as an example, the color that I'm from the object that I'm taking, and usually it works. In this particular case, it didn't for the back color. But let's say when I pull up my font dialog, and depending on what my sender is, I'm checking to see. So case, whatever my sender, I'm going to modify my sender object, right? I'm going to say which object am I clicking on when I'm clicking on the font dialog. I'm using one font dialog, right? I'm not going to rewrite my font dialog twice, right? So because that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know which object it's calling my font dialog box to pop up, right? So let's try that out. It's not really in our code, but let's see if we can do this. So I know I've written this font tool strip menu item here, and whenever I'll bring it up, I'm not going to rewrite it because I want those font tool strips to come up, right? So example would be, if I right-click on my form and I go font, it's going to access the font tool strip, right? Just like I did before. So exit. But what if my font, as an example, is being accessed, just as an example, I want to only modify the font of my button, not the font of my back, but my form. How do I differentiate between which object I'm actually modifying? Yes. So here would be the object selected, was probably what I would do, right? So I would kind of make a some kind of, and I'm probably going to make it so it's like this. I'm saying, well, the object selected is going to be of a certain type. It's not going to be a radio button, right? We don't know what the object selected is going to be. Is it going to be a radio button I'm selecting, or a dialog, or some kind of a menu item, right? So how do I do that? Depending on which menu item is being selected, right? Because there are different menu items that are activating my my button. Is it the menu item that I'm getting from my context menu, or the menu item that I'm getting from my menu, so the menu strip? Which one am I getting? Depending on which one object that is, I need to kind of, so let's see if there's an object for that, right? So that's the first thing I would search up if I was going to do that. So menu, is there a menu item? Yes, there is. So here's a menu item object. I know there's a menu item object. And I'm going to kind of cast, I want to say menu item is my selected menu item. I'm going to make that as a variable, right? And I'm going to say that's equal to, I'm going to cast it as menu item, right? Sender. I'm going to cast sender as that menu item itself. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm saying, whatever, I don't know which menu item is setting me up here, right? I don't know which menu item I'm using to get my font dialog, right? So I want to, depending on what I use, I want to know which one it is, okay? So that's the first thing. And then I can create this case statement, or depending on if I have more than one, cases or a switch statement. So I'm going to say, well, switch, if I can type, like we did before, right? And I'm going to say I'm going to switch my selected menu item, right? Here's my selected menu item, right? Okay, here it is. And case, if it's right, case of whatever the menu item is called. I have to get that name because I don't know what it is, right? So in this particular case, if I go to here and I click on it, it says font tool strip menu item, right? That's the actual name of it. Let's just make sure. So font tool strip menu item. So if it's that, I'm just going to copy it, right? See if I can go back there and paste it. Yeah. Then I want to do something, and I want to break, right? Whatever that is. And if it's not that, and by the way, it's giving me an error, so we got to check this in a second, right? To see why it's giving me this error. And if it's not this one, if it's something else, can we do the same thing as what my ask is? So here's, instead of font tool strip menu item, well, you know what? I want to make it so that when I do my context menu, here it is here, this item here, is it the same name? Font tool strip menu item 1, right? So it's a different name, menu item 1. I should really rename this so it's context file menu strip item, whatever. But let's just keep the same thing, just, for our purposes. So I'm checking for this as well, right? Slightly different name. And then I want to break. I want to do something else inside the switch statement. But it's not liking my selected menu item, right? Why is that? You guys remember what we did before? It's got to do something, right? I'm not just looking at this. It's got to be something I'm doing with it, right? So I can't just ask for it. I got to say, well, is it selected? Like, what is it? Is it checked? Is it clicked? Right? Which one is it? What? The name would be the item that I want, right? So here's the name of it. I'm checking the name, right? So here it is. Now it's not going to give me an issue anymore, right? So let's say, for example, I don't know which one it is. Let's see if this doesn't crap out anymore. If I run it, it's not going to do anything right now, right? But it's keeping track of which font strip is going to come up. And if you notice, it'll crap out. Why did it crap out? So what is the error that I'm getting? to menu item to sender, right? Menu item is not, it's not a sender. The sender object can't be cast as a menu item. It's technically correct what I've done, right? Just like I cast it last time with when it was when I'm clicking on a radio button, right, or whatever. But menu item, this doesn't work properly for menu item. Okay, so I can't really tell is my answer. I can't really tell right now from a menu item perspective which one has been clicked. I can't tell if it's one or the other, right? So, or I've cast it wrong. Those are the two errors that I'm getting right here, right? So again, this is another interesting thing that you guys can check out, right? Check it out. If you were going to change, if you wanted to detect which menu item was being clicked because you wanted to change the context of the menu item, right? How would we do this?
So, I think I figured out what the problem is with the color.
Okay, what's the problem with the color?
I think it's because the select. Can you run the form again and then do the color testing? I want to check if it's not just mine.
Sure. Oh, by the way, look at this. Just before I go on, I'll check that in a second. Here's the sender, and it says and font, right? And font. That's the sender, right? And if I look at the object, I'm just going to move this over so you can see the type of windows that I'm getting here, right? The object is System Windows Toolstrip Menu Item. So that's the actual object I'm getting, right? So I'm getting a toolstrip menu item, not a menu item. And maybe that's what I need to cast it as, a toolstrip menu item, if there's an option. So let's try that. Let me fix that problem first before I move on to your solution, Kevin. So maybe that's it. So if I was going to redo another statement, so if I go toolstrip menu item, if there's such a thing, and there is down here, toolstrip menu item exists, right? That's the one I want, not the menu item, because the toolstrip menu item, right? So I'm going to do Control X, and then Control V, and Control V here. So now I'm casting it properly, theoretically. Let's run that again, right? So I'm running it again, and if I right-click and go Font, it works, right? So that's the answer. It's the wrong kind of object that I've tried to cast, right? I tried menu item, but it's not really menu item. It's toolstrip menu item, and that's what I'm listening for. Okay, so what's your solution for your... Sure.
Go into your edit and the color.
Font doesn't matter. Oh, sorry, color. Color. Yep.
And then you don't have it on the side. Okay, you didn't want it. I looked it up. It says it only stores the selected of the user interaction from the memory of the form. Since you didn't click on anything, it results to a default value, and that top up one will always be standard default, so it doesn't matter. But if you look at the display color, the quote-unquote display color, there's if you widen out the form, it shows a display like what the color is currently selected.
Oh, here.
And then and then it'll actually not what's selected. It'll pick what's.
Oh, sorry. Add custom colors. There it is.
So.
Right. Very good.
So it
actually does work.
It's just displayed inaccurately because it assumes
that
the form.
It's not a standard color, is what we're talking about. So if I go to color, here it is. It's actually highlighted right here, right? Because I've actually enabled this as a standard color right here, right? So there it is. And I can change the background. Thank you.
Yes.
So actually it is working. It's just not showing up.
The user thing is fun.
Wonky.
Yes.
All right. So it's not me, is what you're saying.
No.
All right. So we've got this font toolstrip menu item now, and I want to respond to it differently, right? Because that's the challenge, right? The challenge here is I've got font dialog. This font dialog works well for the back for this .font. I'm changing the font so when I click on the back, when I click on the screen or the form, it's going to change my form's font, right? And this time I want to make it so that it's sensitive, context sensitive. So when I'm using the context menu on my button, right, I'm going to program that in a second, I want to change that, depending on this toolstrip menu item that happens, it'll change what the outcome is, okay? So let's, first of all, right now, it doesn't matter whether it's font toolstrip menu or this one or this one, it's still accessing the form, right? Because if I click here on the background, or if I click here, I'm actually accessing the forms. I'm changing the forms font. But let's add in another toolstrip font option. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's add up another font option here. So I'm going to put in font, right, as an example. Here it is. Okay, and let's click back. And this time I'm just going to move it from here. So I'm going to move this up to here. And if you notice, the default name for this is probably Font Toolstrip Menu Item 2, right? So I know that one is the one for my button, okay? So if I go back to the code, and I don't need this right now, but if I go back to the code, all I'm really listening for is number 2, right? I don't care about these two; they're the same, right? So if that's the case, if this is right, I can take away this break because both cases result in the same thing. I want to use this code here. This is the code that I want to use for when I click on a regular button on the background of my screen, right? Or my form itself. So here's my form, right? And it breaks. So if either one of these cases is selected, the regular tool strip item on the top of my menu, this is the menu, and this is the context menu on the background. But if I want to use another one, so I'm going to copy this one, right? And I'll paste. And it's not number 1, it's actually 2, because I've already asked for 1, right? Oops. And here I'm actually listening for 2. Here's my break, right? I want to do the same stuff, right? But I don't want this. I'll just copy this stuff here, right? Copy. And I will modify it, so it's the button that I'm modifying, right? Paste. And it's not this I want to get it. It's the exit button, right? So it's exit button, right? Dot font is what I want, right? And the same, this exit button dot font is the one that I want to assign, right? This font that I'm getting from my context menu. So there it is, right? So now I've got 2 different uses of the context menu. One from either the menu item, the menu at the top of my screen, or the context menu that when I click on the form itself, and another one when I click on the context menu from the exit button. Let's take a look at that, if that works. So I right-click on font. It's going to actually change the font of my form. So I want to change this to, I don't know, something that's like Jokerman. I got a Jokerman font. So it changes my Jokerman font, the form itself. Now, if you notice, there's no other objects in the form, so this is not a great example. Let's just put an object on there for us so we can see it. Okay, so I want to drop in a label, let's say, because it changes the default for all objects that are connected to it as child objects for this container, which is our form container, right? So common controls, I want to drop in a label, and the label is going to say, I don't know, hello world. Hello world. Okay, here it is. We don't care what the label is called right now. Here's hello world, and I want to run it. And I click on the background somewhere and change the font, and I want to make it, like I said, something else, like Jokerman or Latin. Let's choose Latin. So there it is, Latin. Changes everything to Latin. Really ugly, right? But I don't want my exit button to be Latin. I want to go back to what it was. So I right-click onto it and click Font on this context menu here, right? And if I'm right, and if it works, and it didn't, let's try that again. Oh, Kevin programmed it. Duh. See these things, what happens, right? See? I'm almost there. Almost. Where's my context menu item for that one? Oops. This one. I'll be all right. I know this is long, and you know, so here's my context menu strip, but when I actually pull up my font, right, the event handler for my font, for my click event, has to go to my font tool strip menu item, which I've already written, which I didn't do before. Okay, let's try that again. So again, I right-click, I change the font from my form to something else. I'm going to choose another weird one. Impact. There we go. Okay, so now, but I don't like that for my button, so I right-click and choose font. It pulls up my other thing, and notice, look, it goes right to impact, because that's the one that's being that's active right now. And I want to go up to something a little bit more standard, like Arial, and I want to change the font size for my button to 14. So there it is. So now you have both options. I'm using the same font dialog and the same method that I've written for the event, but it does 2 different things according to the sender. Okay, so this is a good use of one method to do multiple things. Okay, let's go back. So we talked at this at length, so we're not going to kind of go over this too much. All right, and we're going to pause here, this movie, and we will resume.